Okay. So the last thing that I want to talk about a little bit before we really sit down and start busting into our distinct groups is how exactly do organisms end up in these groups. So we're going to do a very, very light evolution review, or at least what will be a review and expansion for those of you that took Bio 130 with me. So we'll do a lot of those same kinds of things that we talked about right at the end of the class, and then we're going to expand that a little bit and look at, well, how does this inform things like speciation? And what does it mean to be a species, right? So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about these distinct classes, reptiles versus birds versus mammals. So before we do that, we want to talk about, well, how did we make these decisions? Now, understanding a reptile versus a bird seems pretty clear at this stage. But of course, once we get into those two, and not a level we're going to talk about, but we do make distinctions between the yellow warbler and the yellow-throat warbler. What does that mean, right? How do we make those distinctions? And so that's really going to be one of the major cores of this topic, is how are these species versus populations separate, and how do we make those distinctions? Where does that come from? So we basically have two major groups of topics that we're going to talk here. The first bit is this evolution versus species and speciation concept, right? So what makes these classes what they are? And then very super lightly, I'm going to introduce the idea of ecology and niches, which is once we have these species and populations, how are they sort of distributing themselves, right? Where do they live within the space, right? What makes a habitat and all of that bit. And this, again, will be very light. We'll get an idea of how they're choosing their habitats, and these will all be things then we'll kind of pull together and be able to talk about when we start looking at our bigger classes moving forward. So we'll have lots of terms and ideas that we'll be able to apply together. Okay, so let's start by looking at evolution. Hopefully, at least to some degree, this will be sort of our familiar landing point. There'll be a lot of things you've at least heard before in some of your previous earlier classes. So remember, okay, when we talk about evolution, and the only one I'm going to talk about here, because we're going to do a light load, is I'm really talking about natural selection. So in this case, we're going to talk a lot about competition, the struggle for existence. We're going to get to dip our toes a little bit in some mass extinction events and what caused those, what wiped out some species and allowed others to sort of rise to power, so to speak, from a biological standpoint. So when we're talking about these sorts of things, the key here, and when we're talking about these classes coming to power, right, finding their habitats, and then ultimately their traits that separate them from one to the other, right, the key here, remember, is thinking about how does natural selection work, and we're going to review that here in a second. And the key pieces here, remember, is it's all based on having a population, right? In this case, we think about our class being just a really big population. And there's some kind of environmental pressure that's driving change in these populations. Okay, so remember the changes that we see, right, the things we see, I'm going to have to get used to this. Okay, so remember, trait expressions are the things we see. So this might be camouflage, behavior. Okay, if you took Bio 130 for me, one of the big examples I use are like our steampunk moths, right, that go from light to dark over time. Okay, but the things that we see, okay, are all genes, right, embedded through time. So remember, your hair color, for example, right, is a phenotype that's made by a genotype, your genes. Okay, so running in the background here is the same sort of thing. Our steampunk moths phenotypes, whether they're light or dark, comes from genes. All right, so that's the same kind of thing going on here. So we're going to kind of re-review how all of this happens. This is the underlying core for all of this sort of business. Okay, we ready to do a review on how this works? Oh, I said that. So let's look at natural selection. Remember, how does this work? So remember, the overall key is, hey, living things get to live and have babies. Babies look like me. Okay, dead things die. They don't have babies. They don't pass on their genes. So how is it that that happens? So we need three pieces for that whole process to work. The whole living things live, dying things die. Very dramatic happening thing. So the first thing I need within my population, remember, is variation. So if we think back to our steampunk moths, remember I had light colored and dark colored moths. Okay, all within the same moth population. Okay, and this is common in any population, right? You don't expect all individuals to be exactly identical. So there's naturally some differences. And remember the differences that we see, right? This is what we see. Wow. That is not how you spell that. So that's our phenotype, right? And anything that we see, our phenotypes actually exists in those genes, right? That genotype. Okay, and so the key here, right, is this is what natural selection is acting on. We picture back to our steampunk moths. We have the tree. The tree is very dark colored. It's covered in ash. I have two colored moths on it, okay, white and dark. All right, so then we ask ourselves, if a bird comes in, what happens next? Okay, birds are naturally lazy. Okay, I am also naturally lazy. Am I going to cook or am I going to DoorDash? Okay, so our bird is also going to DoorDash. It's going to take the easiest route, right? The easiest meal. So it's going to pull our white colored moths. They stick out. Life is easy. So this is what we mean by the environment acting on it. Right, something is happening. So in our case, in our example, right, the environment is the bird, right, picking the easy meal. Okay, 2, this inheritance business. So where I keep saying, okay, if you live, okay, you get to live and have babies, and those babies look like you. Okay, so this is what we mean by inheritance, right? If I'm a moth, I live, right? I'm not eaten by the oppressor birds, right? And I get to breed and have little moth babies, okay? Those moths should look like me, right? Because the way I look, it is part of my genes, and I'm going to pass my genes on to my moth babies. Okay, so my genes keep getting passed on to the next generation. Those genes are what's making me successful, at least partially, right? That's where my camouflage lies. So if I'm successful, okay, I am, at least in part, going to have more successful bebés. If I'm dead, so I've been eaten by said moths, no babies. Right? Dead things have no babies. Okay, feel good so far? Okay, lastly, fitness. Now, fitness is the biggest concept, okay? But ultimately, right, the idea is that whatever thing it is we're tracking, so the trait, okay, has to matter. All right, so this is a lot of bullet points that just says there's a lot of different ways in which the trait, okay, the thing we see, okay, has to confer some sort of benefit to our population. Okay, and there's a lot of different ways this can be. Right, so fitness is what we mean when we say that. Okay, making you more fit. So all of this comes down to, okay, the world in which we live in has a finite number of resources. And that's what this first one is saying. It's not enough food, there's not enough housing, there's not enough mates. Okay? So whatever it is likely gonna give you some kind of boost. Okay, you're gonna live longer, run faster, get better food, get better mates. I don't care what it is, but it has to be at least one thing. It's gonna make you better at that. It's gonna make you better. We call that fitness. Okay, so having higher fitness means you're better at something. Not everything. There's nothing that makes you better at everything, right? But it will make you better at something. So if we think about our steampunk moths, right? The fact that I am dark colored makes me more camouflaged. That makes me better at not dying. And not dying is better at something, right? That's the something I'm good at. So I am more fit, more likely to live, therefore more likely to get a lady. I am a better fit moth. Okay, but this always feels very convoluted to me. I can write a definition out, but at the end I still look at this and I always say, okay. But could I make a list and really have a good understanding of what does it mean to be fit? Fitness is just one of those really crappy science words that I feel like is hard to confer. So let's look at this another way. If I were to say, what are traits that make me more fit? What would they look like? Okay, that's how I like to describe fitness. So let's look at fitness another way. Fitness can be more easily, in my opinion, defined as the 3 S's. Okay, so if a trait is going to confer fitness, it must belong in one of these 3 categories. Okay, so a trait can provide benefits to help you with sustenance. That's my first S, sustenance. So a trait that I have can help me get better at getting food or shelter. Okay, so I might think of something like a benefit in increasing color or shape detection in my eyes. Okay, fiddliness with my beaks. If I'm a bird, right, maybe I can make a better shaped nest. Better at picking colors if I'm going to decorate that nest. I can maybe make stronger nests. If I'm a squirrel, maybe I'm going to be more competitive at gathering nuts. I don't know. Okay, but any of those kinds of things, right? So sustenance. Okay, I'm making a better, safer nest. I'm better at picking spots for my nest. Okay, so better shelter. My second S, survival. Okay, straight up get out of Dodge. Okay, I'm less likely to be picked off by a predator. So if I'm like a zebra, maybe I have longer running legs. Okay, or I'm a bird and I have better takeoff. Bye, Felicia. Okay, our steam pup moths example belongs here, right? My camouflage. Okay, I'm less likely to be caught or seen by a predator. Okay, so I've got a fitness advantage. That's my second S. Okay, and then lastly, sex, my third S. Okay, being more likely, okay, to get a mate. Okay, if one of our goals just straight up is being able to pass off your genes, okay, being able to pick up a mate and do that is going to confer some kind of advantage, right? So red coloration in birds, right? The ladies love it. Okay, complicated dances and songs. Okay, lots of species have that business going on. So any of those things that are going to make you more, did I not say it would do this? Because that's exactly what it did. More successful. Okay. Now, your fitness trait, whatever it is that we're interested in, has to fit in at least one of these categories. It can be more than one, but it has to be at least one. Okay, so this is what we mean when we say fitness. Okay, it has to help in at least one of these. Does that help? Is that much more clear? Okay, any question about what we need for natural selection to happen? Okay. So the last thing I'm going to talk about, and we're actually not going to do all 5 parts because I'm going to slim this down, but the key feature I want us to know, and this is where we'll end here, is when we're talking about things like evolution, one of the main things we'll talk about, because we're going to talk about things like mass extinctions and what these classes are doing, which is a lot of fun, is that as we think about natural selection, right, it's not just we establish these guys, and now we have this great class of chondrichthyes, right, our cartilaginous fishes, which are quite old, right, our sharks, our skates, our rays. As we'll find, these guys have been around for a long time, or the animals you're going to handle this week in lab, they're even older. Okay, but even though we have species come and go, we'll talk about extinction, animals that aren't around at all, but some animals, as they come, right, they're not stagnant. And this is one of the things we talked about last week, or the week before, if you're Monday, right? The animals come and go, okay, and they also change, okay? We shouldn't expect that because Earth is also changing, okay? Continents move, we have earthquakes, we have volcanoes, our land spaces are changing, that if the organisms that live here want to survive, they must also change with the spaces that they're in. This is way too much for you guys to put, so let's just make that. Okay, your exit ticket should be up. It looks like most of you have got it going. So go ahead and fill that out. And then once you are done, my back two rows, you may pack up and head out the back door. Please have a fabulous afternoon. In my Monday lab, I will see you later today.
Professor, for Tuesday lab, there will be comments first, right?
Say again for me?
For Tuesday's lab, Group B is going to come on first, and then Tuesday?
Group A will come first.
Okay. I was confused. Because you said it was going to stay, and Group B came in.
Yeah, so from here on out it will, and I posted a schedule so it flip-flops every single week from here on out. All right, everyone else, you can go. Wow, this really muffles me. You too.